Welcome back, everybody. Today's guest is returning voice to the show, Billy Lahr. Billy spent over 2 decades as an educator before stepping away to see what life looks like beyond a single identity. What makes this conversation different is Billy isn't coming with a clean success story or a tidy lesson. He's in the middle, experimenting, failing, and reassessing right now, wrestling with what it's like to be a generalist in a world that rewards specialization. We're going to talk about grit versus quitting, rejection, generosity, and how to keep moving forward when you don't have a neat and tidy answer yet. This one's real, and you're going to see yourself in a lot of it. Hey, Billy, welcome. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. That you could not have nailed that scenario any better than what I'm going through right now. It's as you're we had rescheduled this, and I had reached out to you one reason for or another, and you said, "Hey, you want to come on the show?" And I said, I don't really feel good about being on the show right now. I don't have much going on right now. I don't feel like I have a lot going for me, and you reframed that quite nicely. You said, well, that sounds like something that this audience wants to hear. So I appreciate the offer to be back on the show. Normally I have my fancy podcast mic and my camera to make me look beautiful, but I wasn't sure that I was going to follow through with this conversation, but I saw the questions that you sent me, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Well, I am as well. And, I think we talked about this just before we hit live here. The listeners, I think, this is going to be impactful, not just, I think, for us to have this conversation, but I think for the listeners to kind of come along, because often we hear the success stories from somebody who's already made it. And if we're the person who wants to make it there, we have to go through all of the work, all the turmoil in order to make it to the other side. And life has a interesting way of throwing us all kinds of curveballs and what ifs, and we don't always have the best path to get through those things. So I think if we can have that conversation from the middle, I think is a good point to stand from, because not everybody gets to make it to the other end, and everybody has to go through that journey in order to make it to the other end. So having that midway conversation, I think is a key point here. Every moment tests you. Every action defines you. This is the prestigious initiative where mindset becomes muscle and character becomes legacy. I'm Chris Bean, martial artist, coach, and relentless believer in growth. If you're here to sharpen your edge, lead with integrity, and build a life that echoes beyond your years, you're home. You can find the podcast on social media at Prestigious_Pod. You can find me at Chris Bean Official, and the email for the podcast is prestigiousinitiative@gmail.com.
And I like that you brought up the middle too, because if having taught English my whole career, we read these epic stories. You think Star Wars, and they all start in medias res, which is Latin for in the middle. And I'm 48 right now. I've been traveling since 2021, when I was 43 at that point in time. So this midlife pivot seems like an incredibly monumental moment in a lot of people's lives. And as I've been traveling around here the last few years and talking to people, I hosted a podcast called The Mindful Midlife Crisis, and everybody would always chuckle at that title because they're like, that sounds like me. So, I'm still in that experimental phase right now, trying to figure out the answer to the question that my dad once asked me, which was, I hope you're a good teacher, because you would starve if you have to do something else. So what else are you going to do? And he said it lovingly. He said it as, kind of a joke. And that's sort of what I've been trying to figure out. What else am I good at beyond teaching? And I think when we take a look at that word teaching, we look at it in maybe a literal sense, just in a classroom. And I've still been teaching, and I will always be a teacher, and I will always be an educator. That's not an identity that I'm ever going to shake. One of the first questions that I ask all my guests on my show is, what are 10 roles that you play in your life? And for me, one of the 10 roles that I always play, and I will play till the end of time, is an educator. So, just what does that look like? Is it an educator in a classroom as an educator, as in speaking gigs, in seminars, at workshops. It can take a bunch of different forms, and that's kind of what I'm experimenting with right now. And it's been a long road, and part of that is because I'm not very good at marketing myself. I think that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later, because I'm more focused on like building the content that I want to share as opposed to selling you on what it is that I'm on my experiences. Because you know I'm not a natural salesperson. If you enjoy the story, you enjoy the conversations I'm having, keep listening. And if you don't listen. And I'm cool with that. And there's not going to be a high pressure pitch that's coming your way. It's just this is me. This is who I am. Either tune in or tune out. I don't really care one way or the other, which is not true. I do care a little bit, uh, you know, but mostly because it feeds kind of my need for words of affirmation, which is one of my top love languages. So as much as I want you to be, paying attention and listening and inviting me to be part of this, in hearing my experiences, um, at the end of the day, if you don't want to, I'm not going to pressure you into it.
All right. So super interesting. Answering that question, what are you good at? And then what are you good at? And then you have, so I always think about like that. And even as you were explaining this, I was thinking, okay, it's like there's like there's two circles. There's the things that I'm good at, and then there's the things people will pay for, and then there's that kind of middle section of those circles about where that overlap happens. And I think oftentimes we are really good at things that people don't care at all about or want to pay money for, and then marketing yourself, that's a whole nother thing, and we can come back to that. But because otherwise you get stuck in a job doing the thing that you were told that you should do, or the thing that you thought maybe you wanted to do. You start doing that thing and you're like, man, I hate this job. And then you're just there. You stay in that job because it's comfortable enough. You can do it. It works. It's paying the bills, but you don't actually enjoy doing it. And that's not really, you might be good at it, but just because you're good at it doesn't mean that's the thing you want to do. And then you kind of get into the question of, well, if I turn my passion into my life, into my the way I make my living, my job, then I'm not passionate about that thing anymore, because the passion fades, because then it's a have to do, not get to do, which is really interesting kind of counterpoint to all of that. And okay, so what's the question in there? I guess my question for you is how have you interacted with those things? Have you seen that thing that you like to do, teaching, become something that you're kind of burned out from, because then it's the thing that you have to do as opposed to get to do? And then, because I know that you've had a wide variety of different ways you've been able to teach people across the time that you've been, that you've been a teacher. I think that, so the interesting thing about teacher, I think teacher is something that we can do all the time. You could be a teacher if you're a salesman. You could be a teacher if you're the CEO. That teaching idea, mindset, I think is the right phrase there. The teaching mindset can happen across any world, any realm, any walk of life. But if you can steer the ship of your life into such a way that you can come into most contact with people who want to learn something, and then you could stand as that teacher to help to teach them those things, that can be the best. All right. So I know I said a lot of stuff there. Do you remember the question that I did ask?
Yeah. The nice thing is, I figured out I wanted to be a teacher very early on, and I knew that was really the best path moving forward for me. And I really enjoy teaching. Where I got burnt out on teaching is when I started working in an alternative setting.
Mm.
And I've had students that were coming to me with socioeconomic, behavioral challenges, academic barriers to learning, mental health barriers to learning, and that those challenges and the negativity, and not their problem, or I mean not their fault. It's it was their experiences that they were bringing in, whether they had negative experiences at school or negative experiences outside of school. They were coming into my classroom and kind of creating this toxicity within the classroom, and I myself was bringing in a lot of toxicity as well, uh, because I was not emotionally mature to handle groups of students like that. I My mental health during that time was not great, so I couldn't be an emotional pillar of support for them. So that wore on both of us. The thing is, like, I would have them for 2 years and then they got to move on to somebody else. But then I always had a new group of challenging students that were coming in. And that's what burnt me out. And I think it speaks more to, you know, Tom Cody is someone that we've had on the show a couple of times. And Tom Cody says that you're not burnt out, you just surrounded yourself with negative people. And that's really what it came down to, is that I wasn't working with the students that I wanted to work with. Now there are probably educators out there who, you know, might frown at a statement like that, but it was very challenging. Like, I think about, what's that, Freedom Writers? Erin Gruelle is, I think, the person who wrote that book. She only worked with those students for 4 years, and she's an amazing teacher. But because she's an amazing teacher, she went on to do other things. But I often wonder, like, if Erin Gruelle had stayed in that atmosphere, would she have burned out? Or did she burn out and then she moved on to another opportunity because she had created it? So it's kudos to her for being able to do that. But I just wonder, like, would she have burned out? And I was burning out in that academic setting and looking for a way to get out. Well, the way to get out was to become a dean of students. Well, the problem with being a dean of students is you're always the bad guy. Nobody likes the dean of students. They make movies where the dean of students is the villain. And the number of phone calls that I would have to make, and the angry parents that I would have to talk to, and the angry students that I would have to talk to, and the angry teachers that I would have to talk to, all of that, again, just kind of, it lent to this negative work environment that I wasn't emotionally equipped to handle. And even when I had started practicing mindfulness and I was able to regulate my emotions a little bit better and manage some of the stress and the anxiety that I had been experiencing, it was just taking its toll on me, to a point where I'm like, I think I want to take a leave from this job. And after my dog passed away, I was like, okay, I don't have any responsibilities. I'm not married. I don't have children. Like, this is the time to do this. So I decided to take that leave in September 2021. And, like, I've essentially been on leave ever since. And I was trying to make something happen with the podcast and turn that into some kind of coaching, but that all failed. That did not succeed. It did not make money. It cost a lot of money to do all of that. And so my default then was to go back into teaching. But I knew that I didn't want to go back into like a regular classroom that I'd done before. And I just happened to find this uh, uh, business English teaching position for corporate clients in Seoul, South Korea. So I was working with Hyundai Kia employees and teaching them business English. And I did that for a year, and I chose not to renew my contract because It didn't pay very well. I felt like I was overqualified for that job. So then I was freelancing, and freelancing pays even less because you're trying to build your clientele. And and it just so happened that a friend of mine referred me to this prestigious private elementary school in Seoul. Not as something that was ever on my radar. I never thought that I would work in elementary. And I went in, and it seemed like a great fit. And so now here I am back in the visa process trying to get my E2 work visa so I can go back to Seoul and do that. And the purpose for that is to extend my runway so I can go back to building some of these things that I was putting too much pressure on myself to build in an unreasonable time frame, because I'm like, well, I need money. I need money. My savings is running out. I need this money. What should I do? But now I'm extending this runway, and I'm really looking forward to just taking my time and slowly building this community where we're having what's called the Jumpstart Conversation series, where we talk about what 10 roles do you play in your life. We take a look at uh, understanding your MBTI because it's really big in Korea. Like on all the dating apps, or one of the first conversations that Koreans will have with each other is, "What's your MBTI?" It's just it's a very common icebreaker, but it's also a nice way to take a look at what's your default personalities, that kind of thing. But then we also take a look at mindful and intentional living, because mindfulness not only changed my life, but most likely saved it as well. It's been a key component in helping me manage my stress. I tell people that, you know, people are always like, "You don't seem like someone who meditates. You're pretty high strung." And I'm like, yeah, I practice mindfulness so that I can be this level of obnoxious, because if I didn't, I'd be an out of control asshole. So we talk about kind of what I call a 9 to 5 mindfulness, not Buddhist monk sitting on top of a mountain sipping green tea mindfulness, but 9 to 5 mindfulness that's practical, that you can use in the moment. And then we actually just finished this up later or earlier today. We do what's called a values auction, where everybody gets 1,000 Billy bucks, as I call them, and you get to bid on what values are most important to you, but you have to bid against other people who also value that same thing. So how much are you of your limited Billy bucks are you willing to spend on those values? And that's what I've been building here lately. And it's funny that if I wish I could go back 3 years and do what I'm doing now, because I don't think that I'd be any further along financially if if I had been doing it. But there would be an audience there that's a little bit bigger. We have a pretty small crowd right now, but they're a loyal crowd, and they continue to come back, and they continue to enjoy and provide positive feedback. And it's really rewarding, and it's really fulfilling. But in the meantime, I still have to pay the bills. So then I go back to a job that I know I can do, and that will keep me afloat while I continue to build this other thing. And you mentioned, when you turn that passion into, you try to monetize your passion, and it becomes work again. This whole idea that do something that you love and you'll never work a day in your life, that's complete and utter nonsense. If you do something that you love, you're probably going to spend more time doing it. You're going to put in 10, 12 hours because you enjoy doing it, and it's going to feel like a lot of work. Now, whether you choose to monetize it, that's kind of up to you, but this whole idea of follow your passions is something that I rail against, because passions to me are a byproduct, and it's a byproduct of first understanding what your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are. So building awareness around what you are good at. And then secondly, what you are curious about, and how you can connect those two things, what you're good at and what you're curious about, and then also connecting it to a community of people who are curious about the same thing, that you're willing to learn from, that are willing to teach you, that are willing to have conversations around that. And once you have those three things, then you know what your purpose is in that, whatever that season of life is. So if you want to turn it into a passion, you need consistency, you need discipline. Everybody talks about those two things, but the two things that nobody ever mentions is you need patience and you need self-compassion. And I think the area that I've always struggled the most with is the patience and the self-compassion. And then once you have all of that, you have that equation, you have that formula, you have that recipe, then you've landed at your passion. Because your passion is something that you're willing to do on the weekends for no money.
Hmm.
And if you choose to monetize it, great. But you can also just work a regular 9 to 5 job that pays you to be able to afford doing this passion project that you just find joy in. Because when I think you start to monetize stuff, you start to lose, people start to lose the joy in it. And that's not to say that that happens to everybody, but from my own experience, I can tell you that once I tried to monetize the podcast, it sucked all the fun and the joy out of it. And I listened to far too many podcast business coaches who tried to tell me, hey, you got to sell, you got to sell, you got to sell. And it ruined the podcast. Like I listened to those episodes during those seasons, and I'm like, these suck. I hate these episodes. And I wish I could go back and just do what I was doing with the podcast and keep the interviews going. But again, it becomes a very expensive passion project at that point. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what's the quitting point?
Hmm.
And I learned how to quit properly from Annie Duke. So Annie Duke is a former poker player, and she has a book about quitting. I think it's just called Quit. And I heard her on the Jordan Harbinger show, which is it's must listening for everybody out there. It's by far the most educational podcast. If you're a Joe Rogan fan, turn it off and start listening to Jordan Harbinger, and you'll be a million times more intelligent. But no, Annie Duke talked about if you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? People say, well, that's insanity if you're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. Is it insanity or is it persistence? Is it resilience? Like, there's something to that as well, because you can't always change over and over again. Sometimes it's just you practice it over and over and over again. Maybe that's resilience. Maybe that's grit. But then the question becomes, what is the criteria that you need to meet in order for you to continue going with what it is that you are doing? And if you do not meet, if that criteria is not being met by a certain, what she calls, there's a deadline for it. So it's the drop dead date, right? You can have check-in points for that criteria. Am I making progress? Am I making progress? But if you don't hit that certain benchmark, if you don't hit that criteria by this drop dead date, it's okay to walk away for good. And that's really how I decided to end things with the podcast, is that I wasn't gaining the traction that I wanted. It was costing me more money than I could afford to be losing at that time, to be spending at that time. So I walked away from it, and I haven't regretted it at all. And it's not to say that I live life with no regrets. I think that's also a ridiculous sentiment. I think, Daniel Pink talks about the power of regret. I'm listening to it again because I think it's such a powerful book about regret is one of our best teachers. So I look back at the last 4.5 years that I've been traveling, and I have a lot of regrets. I have a ton of regrets. But at the same time, I've used those regrets to recalibrate what it is that I need to do in order to reach my 3 month goals, my 6 month goals, my 2 year goals, 5 year goals. I'm using those regrets as recalibration guides, and and when I'm able to reframe them as such, and it's like, okay, these aren't sitting inside of me. These aren't dwelling here anymore. They're not weighing me down. I'm actually able to use them as beacons towards a brighter future.
All right, Billy, there's a lot to unpack there, and I want to go off on a bunch of different tangents. All right, so I read, I got that email I think yesterday, day before, about the values. That is such a genuinely awesome way to think about that, because okay, so number one, so values to me are, I think, exactly what you have in there as values. Most of the time, values, I think people get misconstrued because they think of values like honesty and integrity and that kind of thing, but those to me are morals. Values have a dollar amount, inflated with them or connected to them. Time is the most valuable commodity that we have. So how am I spending my time is my value. So I value being a dad. I value being a husband. I value being a teacher. I value being a podcaster. All of those things are values that I can have. And I think that pitting the group against each other and they have to bid on them on that money scale, I think that is such a wonderful way to really bring that home and make that make sense for people, right? That is wonderful. So next thing is coaching on the podcast. Okay, so that would be, that to me, I think seems like a dream that I would like to have. I think that would be wonderful. I also, like you, I like being a teacher. You know this. I think some of the listeners knows I'm a martial arts teacher. That is my job. I do this podcast because I like to do this. I don't get paid to do it. I don't get paid at all to do this podcast.
You probably pay to do it.
Um, there is a little bit of cost that goes into it, but we use Substack to do the hosting for it, so that isn't paid for that, and I set up my own sort of website, so I don't have to pay for that. I have a buddy of mine that does the editing for it, and he likes doing it as practice for him for editing. So it doesn't cost me a whole bunch to do it, but I can see absolutely if it starts to cost to do the podcast, man, I can't do that anymore. And you're right. If I had to walk away from it, I would be sad that I miss out on these type of conversations to connect with people. But if it starts costing me money to do it and I'm not making any money, then obviously that's the right step. So, okay. So the next thing is passion is the byproduct. Passion, and you talked about being curious. I think passion is the byproduct of being curious at a wide variety of different things, because and this is kind of a term that's out there in civilization now is the polymath. Polymaths are good at a wide variety of different things. They're not just specialists in one thing. And when we were younger, we were told, okay, you can only really kind of walk down this one path and be good at this one thing, and then we just leave all this other stuff alone. And that's really hard to do, especially as a kid, because when we have passion about this, that, or whatever, and a parent, a teacher, some authority figure tells us, hey, listen, you're not going to be able to make any money at that. Leave that to the side. Stop playing. Go do this other thing. And the really tough part about that is now, having grown up, I think most people understand that our parents had no idea what work life was going to be like now that we're in that time. I have no idea what work life is going to be like for my kids, especially with AI being so on the wherever it is at this point. People that are in college right now, by the time they graduate college, the work life that they're going to be stepping into is going to be vastly different because of AI. So it's hard for a parent or an authority figure to say, hey, listen, stop that. Leave that alone. Because then as an adult, we have to do some kind of deep research into ourselves to say, okay, what is it that I'm passionate about? When I was a kid, what did I like doing? And then if you can do those things as a hobby, to be curious about those things, to challenge that curiosity so you can grow in that way, I think is wildly helpful. And then,
So can I jump in here
yeah,
for a
yeah,
second?
yeah.
So I what I see is people too often conflate hobbies with passion. So passion to me is that focus. It is that consistency. It is that discipline. And I think that's good to have. I think that's good to have. I think it's more important to dabble in hobbies
Hmm.
and just enjoy and have hobbies. One thing that I notice in the conversations that I have with my corporate clients sometimes is I'll ask them, well, what do you do for what are your hobbies? And if they're parents, a lot of them will say, I used to have hobbies, but now my hobbies are my children. And I can't judge that because I'm not a parent. I have no intention of being a parent, but it saddens me. It makes me really sad to think that, oh, you don't have a hobby anymore. And I think about my parents, and both of my parents played slow pitch softball, right? But they took me to those things. My dad was in a men's singing chorus called the Sons of Pitches, which I didn't understand that joke until I was much older. But then they would do community shows, and we would go as a family to those community shows. And I think it's really important that your kids see you, see your hobbies. What are what is your if you ask a an 8, 9, 10 year old what do your parents like to do for fun, I think they should be able to answer that question. At 10 years old, I think they should be able to answer that question. What do your parents like to do for fun? My mom and dad like to play softball. My dad would go sing. Those were their hobbies, and they would take me to those things. But were they their passions? No, they weren't their passions. And I don't know that either of them really had like a passion so much, which is fine. And I don't think it's necessary that everybody have a passion that they're singularly focused on, that they're willing to spend time and money or what have you in order to cultivate. But I think hobbies are important because to me, hobbies have that element of connection and community
And play.
built into them, which and play.
Yeah.
There's that that saying, you don't stop playing because you grow old. You grow old because you stop playing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it has those elements in there, which I think is so important for enjoying life. Like one of the we talked about values, and I'm looking at the values auction, and two that stand out as we're talking about. One is an exciting life. You will lead an exciting, stimulating life, encountering a wide range of new experiences with the confidence that you are equal to all challenges and able to enjoy whatever comes your way. So this evening, somebody bought that for $100 billion because because it was the first one and there's 23 listed. People were saving their money for the thing that they really wanted. But then the next one is financial security. Well, that one went for $600 because there was a bidding war for that. Because financial security, we think, well, with financial security, what do I have to worry about any of that other stuff? Well, then you get to inner peace. Well,
Mm-hmm.
does financial security buy inner peace? The Notorious B.I.G. tells you more money, more problems, right?
That's right.
So does it? So the values auction really does ask you to think about, okay, like what is it that maybe what does my life need more of? Is that why I'm bidding on this? Or is this what's really important to me?
Mm.
And I think then as we take a look at values, okay, this is what I want to maintain, or this is what I'm lacking. That's maybe where hobbies and passion can really enhance your life, your lived experience.
Well, and I think that, yeah, it's like the seasoning of life, right? You can go through life and do the mundane thing and have a quote unquote boring, tasteless life, or you can have the spice of life, the seasonings, and that's going to happen when you have the opportunity to inject passion and hobbies into your life. Because otherwise, you wake up, you do, it's all the same stuff. But and I think that having that element of play or that fun type of element, and then like you said, bringing your family along with that, because otherwise you become a parent and that is your sole purpose, which is it should be. But if you lose yourself in the process, then inevitably when the kids grow up and they move out and they do their own thing, which is the hopeful thing that happens as a parent, then you have to re-find who you are. You have to re-find who your spouse is. You have to reconnect with each other. And that I think is probably more work than what it should be, because that's not something that you really need to do, because you can live life in such a way, I fully think and believe that you don't lose those things in the process to begin with. But if you are held fast to that, or you're too busy scrolling on your phone because it's the 15 minutes that you have to sit down and do something for yourself, quote unquote. I mean, you're not doing anything for yourself. You're brainwashing. You're zoned out. Like you're just connect with your family. Anyways, but if you could bring your family along for that ride, then not only do you not lose that connection to yourself and the connection to your spouse, but you gain that connection with your family as well, because then your kids can be there to support you. Then your kids can see, because they're going to, kids, little kids, they emulate mom and dad and they play house. How do they know how to do that? How do they know what role to step into? They do that because they see mom and dad doing those things at home. So if Billy sees and grows up in an abusive type of environment, when he plays house, that's how it's going to be for him, because he doesn't know any other way otherwise. That he thinks that's how everybody's house is. And Sarah gets to see, whoa, that's not how my mom and dad play house. He must be doing it wrong. I'm not going to play with him anymore. And that's where, like, so friendships happen that way. And if you have a 3, 4, 5, 6 year old that doesn't have very many friends, there's some social issues that's happening there, probably stemming from something that happened or is happening at home. Okay, that's a rabbit hole. Sorry. So all that to say is that passion. Passion is the spice of life. And okay, so we also talked about being a generalist versus being a specialist, and I think that's where that polymath type of idea comes in. And I think that's is a newer phrase now. And so I think that maybe more people are embracing the generalist type of aspect. And I know that being a generalist is something that you've embraced. What emotional challenges do you think come with being a generalist and not really having a clear niche to fit into? And the way that I kind of think about this, just for listeners to think about this a bit differently. In high school, you can remember back to high school, hopefully, there was the cliques, and the jocks were in this clique and the nerds were in this clique. Very rarely was there somebody that could hang out with all of those kids. And the generalist is somebody that can connect genuinely with all of those people. That's what that means. And so again, my question is, what are the emotional challenges that come with being able to connect with lots of different niches and not diving into one in particular?
Yeah, this is why I like asking people what 10 roles do they play in their life, because it allows them to break free from those identities that they start off with. The first four is usually familial, friends, and job sort of stuff. And then we kind of dig deeper into what are these all the roles that you play. And it gives people an opportunity to be like, okay, I specialize in this, but I'm a generalist in these areas because these are my hobbies. I think the issue for me, I'll speak about my what the challenges that I face as a generalist is just being stretched too thin. I want to do there's a there's a Nine Inch Nails song. I can't remember what song it is, but he at the end of it he says, "I want to be everywhere. I want to know everything. I want to fuck everyone in the world. I want to do something that matters." That for me is the biggest challenge as a generalist, because there are so many things that I want to do. I actually went to my LinkedIn and I changed it from teacher and educator, the thing that I am now, and I turned it into what it is that I want to do in the next 3 to 5 years. So, like, I don't like using the word manifest, right? But it's to me, it's vision boarding in some way, trying to point my, uh, uh, point myself towards the direction that I want, where I want things to go. Um, but even in that, I talk about, like, I don't have a niche. So in my About Me section on my LinkedIn page, people can go check it out if they want. It's not that interesting, but it says I don't have a niche because, like Walt Whitman says, I am large, I contain multitudes. So I'm an educator, but in that role of educator, there are many sub roles. And and yes, I can be your English teacher, but I'm also a certified mindfulness meditation teacher. I'm also a certified personal trainer. Um, I have been traveling for the last 4.5 years. Are you interested in taking an adult gap year? I've been sober for 2.5 years by choice, not because I'm an alcoholic, but because I wanted to feel sober. I didn't want to drink anymore. So, and I'm doing this while living in Korea where drinking is very much a part of the culture. So, how do you navigate being a sober explorer and visiting these different parts of the world where drinking is very much part of the custom, is part of the norm there, but still being able to interact and engage with the culture and with the people? So, are those not things that I can teach you? Certainly. Am I a specialist in those areas? No, I have experience in which I can discuss it, so I can tell you generally, hey, here's how I manage these things. Um, and so that to me, I get excited at the opportunity to have a bunch of different conversations that may or may not help the person that I'm talking to. But if I was a specialist and I knew a lot about one thing, there's something to be said for that. We need specialists in this world. Do I want my doctor to be a specialist? Absolutely. I absolutely want my doctor to be a specialist if I need an operation in some day. Knock on wood that never happens, right? But I'm clearly not a doctor. So if I have these multitude of experiences that may shed some light on how to navigate the complexities and possibilities of life, why would I not want to generally have those conversations if people find them useful?
Well, I think the other interesting thing is too, if you're so if you're a specialist and you're so much of a specialist, number one, you even doctors, they run the risk of being so specialized that they don't have a job anymore, or they can't be hired because it's so much to pay that person for that, and that's a fear a little bit, but you kind of we are counteracted with that because the phrase is you want to be the was it jack of all, master of none. That is kind of the counterbalance to that. And I think that being the jack of all, master of none might be a better way, because then you can connect with more people. You have more job opportunities. You have more things that you're interested in. Your days are going to be more full, and they're going to be more full of things that you like doing, as opposed to that one thing that you might be really, really good at. I think that is something I've struggled with in the past, is being too much inside of one niche, right? And okay, so and this might be news for you, and it's going to be news, I think, for some of the listeners. This is my third podcast. This is my third podcast. I had a podcast, in fact, with Chris. He was here last time we had this one.
Mm-hmm.
Me and him, we're martial arts teachers, so we had a podcast about how to teach martial arts. So not just martial arts, not just teaching podcast, not just a martial arts podcast, but a how to teach martial arts podcast. And everybody, especially in the podcast world as well, you got to nail down the niche and make it really, listen, if you're too far down a niche, I'm here to tell you, nobody listens to it because it's so far down that it doesn't connect with very many people. Um,
Mm.
it is possible to do too much of that. And I think that in my head, I don't want to be the jock or the nerd or I would like to be the person that can connect with lots of different people. Think about if you are so far down whatever the rabbit hole is that is your successful area in life. You show up to a dinner party, conversations being had, unless they happen to hit the one or two things that you can talk about. Do you just sit quietly and hi, hey, oh, thanks for inviting me. It was awesome. I'm sure to be here next time. Yeah, we're not going to invite that guy next time. He didn't even say anything. So that's a maybe a cautionary tale for going too far down. And okay, so the other thing I thought that you said was really interesting is changing the LinkedIn profile to be the thing that you want to be. So to me, that reads as dressing for the job that you want. Or in fact, I think Stephen Bartlett put this, in fact, on LinkedIn this morning, and I might butcher it because it's been a little bit. It's the cat that dreams of being a lion has to first lose its appetite for mice. And I think that is really profound in its own sense. But it's the same kind of thing as you are already announcing to everybody else and to yourself, and it's a reminder to yourself, and it's giving you an opportunity to live up to that standard that you're now setting for yourself, to step into that role. And I think that doing that is kind of playing a game where you get to put the carrot purposefully in front of you, and then you get an opportunity to ever reach for that carrot. Lots of different things there. And you said sober explorer. And I think that, man, if that isn't a book that somebody's going to write, I think that would be a awesome book to read.
Well, it's funny. I talk to my friend Robin all the time because Robin and I met in Bangkok. Robin's from Minnesota, and we met in Bangkok on a food tour randomly. And Robin's she's got an incredible story. She has a website, Wandering Toward the Light, if people want to check it out. And she's just she's been on a similar journey as I have, but she's been, I would say, even more exploratory than I have. And like right now she's on an island that she could it's 6 kilometers around. She could kayak around it. It's 6 kilometers. It's an incredibly small small island here in Thailand. And I can't remember why I brought that up, but she and I have these catch-up conversations, and I'm always pitching ideas to her, like, well, you could call it this, or you could call it this, or what about this? What about this? And she's like, oh my gosh, let me write that down. Let me write that down. And I think that's kind of a talent that I have, is coming up with like catchy titles. I remember when I came up with the Mindful Midlife Crisis, I told that to my friend Kristen Brown, who's like she's a renowned speaker, and her eyes just lit up, and she said, I'm giving you a year to do something with that title, or I am taking it from you and turning it into something. And I'm like, okay. And she was serious. This is a very successful self-made businesswoman on the speaker circuit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I need to do something with this title. So yeah, the sober explorer piece is something that I'm trying to develop and trying to build, but at the same time, it's got to be a slow build. Like I'm because it goes back to the generalist idea of just being stretched too thin. Because I'm building this Jumpstart conversation series, which is building momentum. How do I work in Sober Explorer content into that Jumpstart series, just so that I'm slowly building stuff so that we can have those kind of conversations? So the Jumpstart conversation series is similar to the Mindful Midlife Crisis. Initially, the tagline for the Mindful Midlife Crisis was helping people navigate the complexities and possibilities of life's second half through mindfulness. and it was too niche because, well, no, I want to talk to people about cultural awareness. I want to talk to people about planning for retirement. I want to talk to people about, mental and emotional health, but I also want to talk about physical well-being. I want to talk there were and I just wanted to hear people's stories as well. So you're right. The whole idea of the riches are in the niches. All right, cool. You go take those niches. For me, the satisfaction is in the generalizations, right? In me being able to take a broader view of what my life experiences are, especially as somebody who in the last 4 years has been to 5 different continents, and my therapist saying you have the ability to blend in wherever you go, and that being like a top 10 compliment that's ever been given to me by somebody. And she's like, wherever you go, you just blend in. You meet people here, you meet people there. And it goes back to your, the high school clique analogy. I played sports, but I was also in the choir, and like I remember I was elected to, like, I ran for student government, and I was elected, and the popular kids were like, I don't understand why you won. You're not even popular. And it's like, it's because, like, I talk to everybody.
Hmm.
Like, you talk to your crew. I talk to everybody. So it's there's this ability to connect. And when you talk about, hey, your friend does your podcast editing for you, that's the power of connections.
Hmm.
So then how do we leverage those connections? You have found somebody whose strength is in editing, and they want to practice it, so they're curious on how to develop that skill. You're curious on podcasting, so you're able to blend that together to build this amazing podcast. And uh and that to me leads to this whole idea of, like, all right, well, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? And you're here having conversations, and I think that's really amazing that you figured that out.
Okay, so I want to say thanks for that, because well, firstly, thanks for telling me the show is great, because that's nice to know, and especially somebody that's been in the podcast realm for a length of time. But it is that is a question that I almost continually ask. What is, like, I similar, I think, to you. I have a lot of things that I'm interested in, a lot of things that I can do. I can do woodworking, I can do construction, I can do teaching, I can do podcasting. Like, there's a lot of things that I can do, but I don't know always what that thing is that I was put here on earth to do. And so it's nice to hear that is an answer, that having the conversations with people is something that I can do, and people find benefit from. And even if it's just the person that I'm talking to right now, which is you, and we get to bring the listeners on. Listeners, thanks for being here. I appreciate you guys. But having this conversation with you, Billy, is why that I'm here. I came into the studio here today because I knew that I was going to talk to Billy Lahr. I have talked to Billy Lahr in the past. I'm excited to talk to Billy Lahr. Billy has a wonderful, like a contagious energy that he just exudes, because he is that type of person. So if you know Bill, you know what I'm talking about. He has that. And when you say that you have the ability to connect with people across all different, absolutely, I can see that. And even from, was it a year and a half ago, however long ago it was when we first connected for the show, I could see that then. And that is something that is unique to you. And I think that we all have our own uniqueness. Sometimes we have to be reminded of what that uniqueness is from time to time. And so I say that to say thank you. Thank you, Billy. Appreciate you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you as well. I appreciate it. Like I said, words of affirmation are my love language. So, feel free to shower me with compliments.
Well, Billy, I have to say that in this conversation today, I think we kind of just scratched the surface, but truthfully, I think we could do a whole nother one and really kind of dive into some of these key points, because there was so much here to unpack. But the story that we talked about here today, I think that it reminds me that every meaningful thing in life comes with it. with a messy arc. It's not all clean and perfect plan, right? We imagine God's plan for us as a linear line. We start at the bottom of the mountain, we walk to the top of the mountain, woohoo, we made it. But often we find that that is not at all the case. Sometimes growth looks like experimentation, rejection, and continuing to show up no matter if somebody's on the other end or not. And as we're getting ready to wrap up, Billy, do you have any key thoughts or final takeaways for the listeners? And for those listeners that would like to learn more about you or connect with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, it's as far as takeaways, it's really important to get to know yourself. And I, as corny as a personality profile test is, that they're not they're not reliable. They're not, there's no science behind them or anything like that. But it can give you sort of a baseline of what your tendencies are, what your default behaviors are. And it's important to take a look at, like, hey, what are your strengths? What challenges do you have? What are your needs? What are your opportunities? Uh, and being honest about them, and not just looking at the strengths and saying, "Yep, those are all me," and "Nope, none of those weaknesses are me." No, that's not me at all. Well, you're saying that they probably all are. Um, or at the same time, looking at your strengths and owning them, and not only looking at the weaknesses. So, and really having a like an honest conversation with yourself about, and if asking other people, saying, hey, this MBTI, which I think MBTI is garbage, but whatever, it serves its purposes because I'm in Korea, so it's a nice baseline. But you look at that and say, according to this says that these are maybe my strengths. Where do you see these showing up? Have conversations with your spouse. Have a conversation with your children. Are they seeing these things as your strengths that you are not seeing? That builds awareness, and then what you can do with that is leverage it. When you understand your strengths, you can leverage those. When you understand your weaknesses, you can catch yourself in the moment and be like, oh, let me hit the pause button right here because this is starting to creep up a little. That was one of the biggest takeaways for me when I started practicing mindfulness, was recognizing when I was starting to spiral into negative default behaviors. That to me is step one. Is just start understanding yourself better. I talked about love languages. Nothing has improved my ability to make connections in relationships and deepen my relationships than understanding my love languages and then having conversations with the other person about their love languages. Because then I can communicate to them, like, hey, this is how how I feel loved. This is how I feel wanted. Tell me how you want me to reciprocate that, because that's also important to me. And just making sure that those things are aligned. All those things may sound corny, but the more we understand ourselves, the more that we are not operating on autopilot any longer. We are actually operating more mindfully. We are actually operating more intentionally. And I'm not one of those people who uses the word mindful lightly. I had someone once tell me, Billy, do you think mindfulness has a PR problem? And I do, because there's too many people out there who are overusing it and abusing that word of mindfulness without having an understanding of what it truly means. And what it means is to be in the present moment without judgment. So when you are spiraling and you catch yourself, that's mindfulness, because you're bringing awareness to the present moment, and you're saying, oh, hey, I'm spiraling right now and I'm projecting this. So let me pause. Let me create space in this moment right here so that I can now respond as opposed to react. When you're able to start doing that, your life is going to dramatically improve. And then you're going to gain clarity around things that you're curious about. And then you can start digging deeper into that. And your relationships and your connections are going to improve significantly so that you see these other people who are curious about the same thing you're curious about. And now you're just expanding your world, your connections. And the longest running study on happiness shows us that the people who have good connections, strong friendships are the happiest people. So there's no, especially coming out of COVID. I know we're what 5, 6 years out coming out of COVID, but there's still this residual disconnect, especially in this AI and digital day and age. We need this interaction. So get clear, get aware on what your strengths, weaknesses are. Let those things guide your curiosity, and let that curiosity find your community. And in doing so, you're going to be on a path towards a more fulfilling and enriching lived experience.
And Billy, if the listeners wanted to get in contact with you or learn more about you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I'd say the best way to get in contact with me is either on LinkedIn. So you can find me at Billy Lahr, Lahr, or you can follow me on Instagram. It's mindful underscore midlife underscore crisis. If anything I've said to you is interesting, or you want to learn more about the Jumpstart Conversation series, where we talk about the 10 roles, we talk about cultivate or getting a better understanding of your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, living mindfully and intentionally, or understanding what it is that you value, shoot me a message and I'll send you a link to the information page. I built a little website that has all the details about what we talk about in the Jumpstart Conversation series. And Chris, maybe I'll share that link with you too if you want to put it into show notes.
Absolutely.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. And I will absolutely have all those links that you mentioned there in the show notes. And, listeners, if this episode resonated with you, it's likely because you are in that middle space that we talked about here today. Share this with somebody who is quietly wrestling with identity or maybe even reinvention of themselves. Subscribe to the show, and remember, you don't need a polished niche to feel valuable. You just need the courage to stay in motion and keep learning who you are.